All right, guys, welcome back to another interview. Today we have Thomas Rousseau here, the founder and leader of Patriot Front.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for inviting me to your studio, I guess.
Sure.
And yeah, thanks for coming on and having this conversation.
I'm
Thanks
looking
for being
forward
here.
to speaking with you.
Yeah. So, I guess let's just start from, kind of your childhood.
Okay.
Like obviously you're in a position of leadership at a pretty young age.
Yes.
You're 26, correct?
Currently, yes, I am.
Yeah, so I guess what was kind of your childhood like? Did your parents instill some of these values that you, that you care about today?
In certain ways, but my parents are not responsible for any of my political actions,
Yeah.
I need to say, of course, and they were not extremely political people. I do think, my parents raised me as well as can be considered under any reasonable circumstance. They gave me a lot of opportunities and a lot of good influence. My parents were divorced for most of my life from a very early age. So perhaps some impression was made on the difficulties of the modern American family unit, as well as the role that the government, via the judicial system, plays in broken families. And I think that taught me a little bit about how things maybe shouldn't run. But I don't want to, trash on my parents in such a respect. It's a very common story. A lot of people, have a story like that. But early on, had the very basic form of patriotism. A young man who likes America. I was a Boy Scout. I was engaged in civil service and charity work, and I loved the outdoors. I wasn't extremely well read on history, but in the basics, I was proud to be an American. I was proud to, I loved Texas and everything like that. And then, when I got older and I got into high school, there was a very notable shift from my early to my later years in high school, because during that time frame, I went to Coppell High School, and it was a very nice city, very, very valuable school that people would come from all over the world to get their kids into the school district. And a lot of them came from India, a lot of them came from Nepal and Korea. So I bore personal witness in a real time scenario of the replacement of Americans in their civil institutions. And it happened rapidly over the course of the years I was in school, and that was in conjunction with me on the internet in certain forums and places seeing people talk about the migrant invasion of Europe, where it was very common to see the Muslim caravans coming over the ocean and over the borders. And likewise, then Trump began his presidency around the same time as I was in my last 2 years of high school. And of course, one of the main talking points was immigration, right? And it's still one of the main talking points today. It's one of the issues that people care most about, and not unfounded for that reason. So all of these things kind of combined into an understanding that there is something deeply wrong in the country. And I had a lot of these innate and instinctive sensibilities, which grew as I was able to go into online spaces and talk and debate with people. And I gradually got involved in activism when I was still in senior year of high school. And then that helped me get a little bit acquainted with kind of where the rubber meets the road. And I started being able to work with other people, and I found naturally that I had some propensities for leadership and organization. And that lasted for a couple of years, off and on, and I didn't have any great personal failures in that moment because I wasn't really in charge of a whole lot. But I was witness to a lot of inefficiencies. I was witness to a lot of good quality men that inspired my faith in nationalist organizing as something which can, should, and must be done. But I also saw a lot of lackluster organizing. I saw a lot of people who were wasting time or going for false ventures, unnecessarily pursuing risk for the sake of ego or personal gain. And that taught me a lot of what could be better. So I had the faith that something could be done right, but the skepticism that it was not being done right. And then, of course, Charlottesville was the grand turning moment, and I feel like in my life and in a lot of people's lives. But for me, I feel like it was a change for the better. It was a tough lesson, a necessary one, though, and after the dust was settling from the chaos of Charlottesville, which is a poorly planned rally, not that anybody, I believe, or not that, I mean, you can't speak for everybody, but I did not show up with any negative intentions. I did not show up with the intention that this was going to be a violent or, chaotic, deleterious public assembly, right? So it was also a moment where I lost a lot of faith in the ability of the government to keep the peace in such scenarios. So that's a long answer to a short question.
No, yeah, that was definitely a good answer. So I know we were talking about this yesterday off camera, but
Yes.
you said you were in groups before you obviously started your
Yes.
own. What were some of the, I guess, main things or main lessons you learned that these groups were doing wrong that you didn't like, that you learned
Right.
from to implement to then make Patriot Front a better group?
Yeah, so I was in a group called Vanguard America for about a year, maybe 18 months, before I founded Patriot Front. And some basic things, going to pre-advertised rallies, right? Lack of operational security, and of course that's an ongoing arms race, right? As new fields and new technologies, new practices, new scales, new avenues, you need to implement new tactics for keeping that safe moving forward. But VA, the group I was in at the time, was behind the curve consistently. Lack of proper vetting and internal culture. Internal culture, building that, it takes years to solidify. So, people aren't, totally to blame for that in the specific circumstance, but the lack of a professionalism, the lack of discipline, upward facing cultural, the idea that men have to be better, the idea that men have to be improving, that there is a higher standard expected of them. I feel like there was a sort of a belief in the movement back then, the movement as much as you could call it that, and even among certain individuals, and you can still see it's persist a little bit today, that as long as you have the right racial beliefs, as long as you have the right political opinions, your character, it can take a back seat, right? Your conduct and character is, well, hey, he's one of us, right? So, whatever it takes, as long as you have the right opinions on race and immigration and stuff like that. And again, those opinions are important, incredibly important, massively important. However, your conduct and how you represent those is almost equally important. Because if you are not being a good representative of your ideals, you're not able to actually press them forward, and it can even be counterproductive. So I think being a good representative of your ideas is almost as important as having them in the first place. So anyways, that was one of the big deals which made previous organizations that I bore witness to and worked with inopportune. Alongside that, association with a lot of people, I think one of the big lessons learned from Charlottesville was that you can't throw a dozen groups together which all have divergent principles and sensibilities and tactics and cultural touchstones from which they draw their prime motivations, and you can't expect them to stay together for long. When the tent gets big enough, it's a circus, right? So there you go. Those are some of the lessons I learned.
Okay. What do you think some of the core principles are that you want everyone in your group to have? Well, I know we talked about this a little bit, and you kind of touched on some of those things. Like obviously, you have to present yourself well, as well as these ideas. And I see a lot of people nowadays. They think it doesn't matter how they look, or how they behave, as long as they have these beliefs. And that's why I think your group has been particularly successful. It's because you guys kind of try to include all of that and try to be presentable. So what are some of these values that are the most important for the group?
So on the political side, on the ideological side, it's important for our members to have the understanding of what an American is, right? A big distinction that I feel like something that a lot of people get hung up on is citizenship and nationality are two different things, right? Nationality is a naturally occurring matter. Nations are natural. Nations are an extension of the natural collectives, just like families are, just like communities are. I said in an interview before that if you started the world over again, you just dropped everybody around the earth, if we just hit the reset button, you would get nations. You would get different nations, but you would get nations again. You would get families, communities. They're naturally occurring. It's written into our DNA, our blood, our heritage, or the construct of the universe, right? So in that, nationality is a naturally occurring process, and citizenship is not. Citizenship is man-made. Citizenship is something which is outlined by a government, by a state, by a man with a pen, hopefully a really smart one, but in our cases today is not. So what an American is not just a citizen. There's plenty of Americans who are citizens. There's plenty of citizens who are not Americans. And I think it's really important to have the conception of what a nation is. A nation is natural. And being an American in terms of your nationality is something which you are born with, and in some cases can assimilate into, right? Europeans who are not from America can become American. but it is a process of assimilation. It's a process where you must leave something behind and then fill that gap with your new nativity, right? So there is something to it, and we do have a unique culture, which is not totally pan-European. I'm not a believer in, the magic dirt concept just for white people. You have to be something. We are unique. We exist here with a culture which is derived from our being part of the European diaspora, and also being a part of a Northwest European Anglo-Saxon legal and social tradition, which is distinct from some other European nations.
Yeah.
Again, any European can assimilate into being an American, but that is not to say that our foundational American culture is entirely unanimous or split evenly in all of the European sources it is drawn from, of course. But anyways, back to the point of the conception of what a nation is, the conception of nation and state as two separate things. Nations as naturally occurring, the natural hierarchies that bind human civilization, and then the man-made structures which are meant to reflect them. And right now, one of the main problems in society and governance and everything is that the man-made structures are no longer referencing natural law. And the further they get divorced, the more society becomes dysfunctional, of course, for the everyman. It becomes instead exploitative for those who are operating it. But anyways, that's one of the core conceptions. Personal presentation is important, but it's not just, we don't want people to just look good. We want them to be good. Because I'm a firm believer that optics, the term optics is silly. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday, because optics as a means of how you present yourself, it's like a marketing tactic, people say. But I don't believe in marketing, I believe in representation. I believe that we need to look good because we are good. We need to act disciplined because we are disciplined. We need our message to be thoroughly American because we are. Our critics in the SPLC and the ADL, they say that we're cloaking our opinions in patriotism. And it's garish and it's a lie. They say it's dishonest because they can't allow American heritage. They can't allow our nationality and our nativity to be truthfully reflected to their audience, because it is a source of nationalism, of racialism. It is a source of our unique heritage and our nativity to this land, which is not universal, which is not an idea. This is a nation of blood and toil. This is not a nation of amorphous ideas. So that's a few of the things which are very important to be a member of Patriot Front. I could keep going, but
yeah. Those were some great answers.
Yes.
How long has your family been here in the United States? I'm sure you're probably closer to the founding stock. So
since before the United States.
Before.
Some of my earliest American ancestors were settlers in New England in the 1600s. I think the early or the mid 1600s. So very early on. Very early on, and then my family spread out from New England largely through the South, and then I have some family from the Deep South. Obviously, I have a number of generations from Texas. Both of my parents are originally from Texas, and somewhere along the line, there was some Cajun ancestry, which is where I get my last name. Sometimes people call me French. Of course, I'm not French. I'm an American. Yeah. But there were plenty of French people who became American, who were a part of the founding stock. The Huguenots, the Cajuns as well. So that's where I get my surname from.
Okay. Do you think that's why you have such a passion for the United States? Like it's obviously in your blood, like you talked about. It's in it's in your genetics. Do you think that plays a big role? I
have a passion for America. I have a claim on the United States, though. But yeah, absolutely, yes. Me being, my pedigree, I think, certainly influences and impacts it. But this is a natural thing. Why wouldn't it, right? Yeah. This is a very normal thing for somebody to believe that I have so deeply rooted convictions, and my patriotism, my sensibilities, my ideology would be utterly out of place if I was to be dropped in any other country around the world, even in a European country. If a PF were to do a march, or if British people were to do a march that looked just like Patriot Front, everybody would be very confused, right? Yeah. Even if their rhetoric was to sound like ours, right? So I think nationalism must be natural, right? It must be born out of your own country. And of course, there's plenty that we share with our European cousins, right? But at the same time, we must be distinct because we're fighting for our unique culture. Yeah. And I think another core tenet of the organization is the nation-state principle, right? Where you need to have one nation and one state. In the course of human events, governments, if they are any smaller, drawn around boundaries any smaller than the nation, they will be ineffective. They'll be weak. They will be easily conquered. They will be split apart by their enemies. And if they are any larger than the nation, then they will be tyrannical. Any government which attempts to govern over multiple nations will naturally decay into imperialism, plutocracy, oligarchy, tyranny, and then it will split. You can look at Yugoslavia, you can look at the USSR, you can look at Rome, you can look at Alexander the Great's empire. You can look at the modern, contemporary United States of America, or the British Empire, etc. There's many examples of it. So the nation-state principle, the nation and the state must be drawn around the same boundaries. All of Americans should exist under the same ultimate government, the same state, not to be confused with the individual 50 states, but the same state. So, but yes, me being very American means that I am more in touch. I have more skin in the game.
Yeah.
I have more ancestors. I have more generations of family. I have more in my being, in my sinew, that is being attacked and assailed. And also I have such a deep appreciation for American culture that I'm more aware than a lot of people of how much we stand to lose and how much value there is in that is currently being washed down the drain, so to speak.
Yeah, you touched on this concept of you could be a citizen, but you could be American, or you could be, born here and you were not an American. What does it mean, on a spiritual level, like kind of a soul level, to be an American? What are some of these values? How does an American act in your eyes?
Of course. So I think there's a number of unique things about being an American. Not only are we, we are members of the European race. So we have we are the descendants, we are the heirs of European civilization and Western civilization in some concepts. We carry on the traditions of ancient Greece and Rome in terms of our, what should be a republican, a small r, republican style of government. We have an Anglo-Saxon, derived, racial culture. And I think in that there's natural rights and liberties that you even see reflected in ancient, Iron Age feudalism, which were reflected upon by our founders. You have the unique experience of the diaspora of the European race, which is shared between us and Canadians, the Boer, Australians, New Zealanders, of our experience of being conquerors in the New Age, right? America was a place. I mean, it was the Americans trod across this great frontier, these massive plains and primordial forests. The last time Europeans en masse experienced that was in prehistory almost. It was in the age of the Indo-European steppe chariots, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a sort of ancient quality of manifest destiny, which made us at both, we were in a uniquely civilized age, bringing industry and civilization, creating public schools in the wilderness, right? That's the American civilization. It's a sort of it's closing the loop of Western civilization. You have the ancient qualities and you have the emergent, the revolutionary, the dynamism, the ability to look at the old world and still be uncontent with all that it has to offer and create something new. And again, a lot of these things are innate, right? When you say define culture, a lot of people just go to, the food and how you build the buildings, but a lot of these things that they need to be experienced. And it's something that is real when you see it,
Yeah, culture isn't just about food. It isn't what you do. It's how you think. It's how you behave. It's how you carry yourself. Mm-hmm. All these things matter, and it seems lost nowadays, to be honest.
It's getting there.
Yeah. What do you think are the biggest problems in the modern age? I guess individually, culturally, and just as a nation. What are some of the biggest problems that if we solve those, everything else would be kind of downhill from there?
Right. Well, some of the biggest problems are also, I would say they big means important. Big means relevant. So I would also say, the ones that are most important are the ones that we are most action item available to us, right? So I would say the declining virtues of our men, of the nation. I think that is something which is both immediately workable for us and also incredibly, because everything is downstream from us. You can say that, immigration is a huge issue, and of course it is, right? But we are not currently on the levers of the immigration policy. You could say that, the banking system, the monopolies of insurance companies. You could say that, foreign wars are the greatest issues, and these are all massive issues, I must say. But we need to have a practical understanding of politics and a practical understanding of organizing, and I think nationalists, especially people, again, nationalists, by necessity, in my opinion, have an understanding of race and nationality that is akin to the founders and akin to our, modern convictions. But I think we've been shut out of politics, conventional politics, for a very long time. So many decades have gone to purely messaging, refining arguments and debates, slogans and symbols, and that's good. But there's a point at which it becomes too theoretical to reconnect. So I think one of the biggest issues is that we lack traction as nationalists with the political system. And I'm not just talking about elections and votes. I'm talking about engaging and organizing. You look at, other groups in the left or other ethnic groups which are invading the country. You look at Muslims, Indians, Sikhs, all of these groups, even black communities, how intertwined they are, and how much they lean on each other when times get tough. I think our culture of strength and unity, of e pluribus unum, of many one, has been replaced with a culture of buy your own bootstraps and reject help and charity, and don't offer it either. And of course the very boomer mentality of I'm going to throw everything away right before I die, which actually means giving it to insurance companies and banks. I think our culture, the virtue, has been extracted from our society, and I think, like a plant, like a soil, the bones are there, but it needs to be rehydrated with this virtue. And then a lot of problems will not solve themselves, but they will grow much smaller and more easily tackled in comparison to what they seem today.
Yeah, it seems like people don't want to do things for the betterment of others, for their communities. It's always just take. How can it benefit me as an individual?
Yes.
Like if there is no benefit to you, it's like, why would I care? That's the mindset of most people.
People need to have a broader horizon. People need to have a broader understanding of purpose. I think purpose is one of the things which has been so heavily taken from our lives, where people without a strong culture, a natural culture derived from natural identity, family, community, nation, race, will instead get an artificial one, right? So people are now defined by their class, right? They're now defined by their job, by their hobbies, by their social media aesthetic. They're defined by these fake little social cliques, or they're defined by nothing at all. They're an undefined person, aimless with purpose. And especially if you create an economy in which people can't afford to have children, then you're not even going to be able to be defined as a patriarch, or as a mother, or as somebody who has a physical stake in the next 80 years of the world after you go. So I think the extraction of purpose, the extraction of civic virtue, and personal virtue, because virtue in public and private life is equally important. I think that is one of the greatest issues facing. And Patriot Front is an engine for creating the kind of men that we need to make the nation. Right. What we do is political. It's extra political. We know the true convictions of politics, but we practice them outside of the conventional framework. Right. But one of the things is we change minds, lives, and bodies, right? We're taking men and making them fitter. We're giving them new skills. We're getting them new jobs. We're getting them, we have housing networks. We give them new experiences. We give them a chance to contest themselves with the state of the world. And I think once you engage in that, once you're fighting, right, the aimlessness, the dissatisfaction, a lot of the depression, which is so rampant in political, the cynicism, the nihilism, it goes away because you can confidently say, I'm fighting, I'm doing everything that I can, and in that fight there's optimism, there's beauty, there's splendor and grandeur, and you can reconnect with your ancestors who did a lot of the same. So I think that is a big element to rekindling the spirit. I do think going back to also what something unique about Americans is I think we have a founding mythos, we have a founding heritage in this country. We have a revolution, and there's a remarkable continuity in American history, where you can look back at other certain European nations, which have existed for thousands of years, and they've existed under every form of government, and they've existed into prehistory. But I think America has, and of course I'm biased, right? But I think America has a narrative to its story. I think there's a greatness in the power of the narrative, and how our past struggles and triumphs contrast and give us great insight and motivation against our current troubles and challenges.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely real. Like what your ancestors went through, it's still ingrained in you, even
Absolutely.
on a spiritual level. But kind of speaking about values, things like
Yes.
that. Are you personally religious? Like, what are your religious beliefs? And do you think that's important nowadays? Because it seems like the media, whoever is trying to push it out of us. They want us to be obviously atheists, like nihilistic, only think about pleasure, just be hedonistic and go down this rabbit hole where after I die, it's black, nothing happens. Why would I
Right.
care about my children?
Of course.
It doesn't matter then. Yeah, so what are
Yes,
your thoughts?
I'm not personally religious, very, very much. I'm vastly interested in the religion, specifically those practiced by the members of the organization. I'm always talking to the members about their experiences. We have Patriot Front has Christians of almost every denomination, and we have various practitioners of European paganism, heathenry, and there's a few different sort of denominations or systems of practicing that. Of course, every member of Patriot Front, with their religious practices, it is in compliance and complementary status to the convictions we uphold, right? But I don't personally, at this moment, engage in any structured, religious institution. But I am vastly respectful of and interested in the various practices of the members, and I seek to encourage that expression. So the organization itself doesn't have, a official religion that we try to impose, or we don't preference members on one or the other. So the organization is secular, but the membership, by and large, vastly is not. But I do like to encourage that expression. I like people to feel like they can find like-minded individuals of like faith within the organization, and in many cases they do. And it helps them kind of reconnect that element in life, because especially with Christians and even with pagans, there's a lot of people who practice those faiths, and one might say falsely or less accurately, who do not have patriotic, nationalistic opinions, who are in favor of globalism, who are part of these institutions which have been very much subverted, diluted.
Yeah.
So it's important to, I believe, bring the political and the religious, the ideological, the public and private back into harmony. But is it important? Absolutely. George Washington in his farewell address, right? Very immortal words. We should all be familiar with the document if you can. If you aren't, then go read it. But he said that religion and morality are very much intertwined, and they are incredible pillars for society. John Adams, I believe, said that our Constitution is written for a moral and religious people, and it is totally unsuited to the governance of any other, right? And I believe those words are true, and I do think, in religion, obviously there is the conception of the afterlife. There is the conception of the continuity of existence. And even in nationalism, I think on a secular basis, you can have an understanding of the nation as something which is a sort of superorganism, right? It is larger than you. It is immortal in a sense that you are not, right? The nation, it thinks, it breathes, it lives, and it can die. It can be killed. It can get sick, right? And it'll outlive us through our children, but not only our children, not only through those first-person lived experiences, but also through the collective unconscious, right? I think there is an element of an almost metaphysical, transcendent quality to the nation as an organism, a social organism, which must extend beyond us. And I think that is something that even somebody who isn't necessarily religious can adhere to and feel recognized by within the organization, of course.
100%. Yeah, I kind of want to get back a little bit to your, I guess, personal life. So when you started this group, it was in 2017, I believe?
Yes, 2017, I believe September.
Yeah, so when you first started it,
Yes.
Did a lot of people join right away? Was it just a couple members? How did that kind of evolve to this group you have today?
Yes.
Which I'm not exactly sure how many members you have.
A lot.
I know you don't want to disclose.
Yeah. More than we
but-
did back then.
Yeah, so how did it kind of evolve through these years?
Yes.
Were you still working a job back then? Did you just jump into it head first? Full
Certainly
time?
jumped into it head first. So after Charlottesville, there was about a month or two where I was engaging in squabbles and trying to figure out next steps, and everybody decided it was a great opportunity to infight at that moment, which further instilled my dislike and disdain for infighting of all kinds of unnecessary qualities. So then Patriot Front started. I think we had about 30 members nationwide, and they were not all in a few clusters. It's very much spread out all over the South and the West, everywhere from Florida to Washington. So it was very much dispersed, and we had maybe a dozen in Texas. And that was where I was, so that was kind of a nucleus starting out. And in some ways it still is today. But the first thing, I think something that defined Patriot Front quite well, is before we had our logo, before we had all the new banners and the clothes and the uniform, because a lot of people, they start new groups nowadays, and you still see political groups come and go, and they say, all right, well, first things first, what is our flag gonna be? What are our uniforms gonna look like?
Yeah.
What is our, we need to get all the merchandise together. But actually, I think it's much more important that you first define yourselves with action. Before we had any of the new stuff, any of the new merch and the trim, we were already out there demonstrating. Our first action was a protest of a Houston anarchist book fair, wearing the same stuff we did when we were still part of the other group. So I think that was a defining characteristic. It kind of influenced PF's disposition, in years to come. Get into the action, and you find yourself through that. You find yourself through the traction. I think another big thing that helped us is due to our activism, we always have traction with the world. I feel like a group, especially of a radical or revolutionary nature, if you are very radical, you are distanced from society. You are distanced from the conventional. And if you do not have traction, if you do not have activism, organizing, engagement, back and forth, exchanges with the world, with society, you can grow alienated yourself to it in a way, unsuitable for your interaction with it. Meaning that you're less capable, you're less relatable, you don't understand how to reach people, you're less approachable. So because we've always been active, we've always had a back and forth with our supporters, with our enemies, with the state, right? And it's helped us a lot maintain a grounded focus. I think one of the main things is that we're grounded, we're sensible, we're rational and reasonable in how we engage with each other and with the outside world. But yeah, the organization grew very slowly and very at first. We've picked up speed, of course, and we've developed organically. The organization is a nation within a nation, so to speak, right? A nation that shall become the nation, as I've said. So, it's a natural process. We're always growing, and when new members, like a country growing in size, we have new institutions, new infrastructure, new skills, new resources. We are constantly chafing at our frontiers in every direction, right? Both geographically, or we are planting the organization's flag in new areas around the country all the time. And we are recruiting new men to the cause. We are achieving new levels of influence to transform their lives for the better. And it's a very cumulative process. It's not a matter of Patriot Front is going to get to 1,000 members or something, and then we're going to suddenly decide, all right, now it's time for us to be a FEC registered political party. We're not going to get to a certain point, decide, okay, well now it's time to totally rework it, right? It's an organic, it's a cumulative, it's a growing process. And I think that's largely defined our success throughout the years.
I want to jump back again a little to your,
Sure.
childhood. What was your goal as, a kid growing up? What did you want to do? Because to be in a position you're in, obviously you've been to jail. You've probably had
Only 3 times.
Only 3 times.
Yeah.
You've probably had some difficulties that you could have avoided if you just took a normal path. What
Certainly.
kind of inspired you to just, I'm going to kind of put myself out there. I'll take the bullets for what I want to achieve. Was there a specific moment that had flip the switch in your brain? Because it takes a certain type of person to kind of go out and do this.
It certainly does, and I'm lucky to have found that I am that kind of person. I would say, starting Patriot Front was one of those moments where, I could have, at that time, and I mean, it isn't in my sensibility, but it would have been possible for me to just throw up my hands and say, you know what, the movement is trash. Everybody who believes in this kind of stuff doesn't know what they're doing, and I could have allowed my then current experience and allowed that quality of the people I was unfortunately working with or working against at those times or working against me to reflect absolutely on the ideals that were proclaimed at the time, and then I would have been utterly cynical and I would have delved into nihilism. And as a young man, though, it is interesting. I did originally want to be an artist, which I am still today, actually. I do a lot of Patriot Front's art, the promotional materials. I'm a designer for the organization. I dictate a lot of the art direction, right? So in some ways, I succeeded in being an artist. I found out in Boy Scouts early on I was a good leader. When I was in the high school newspaper, which some people like to poke fun at, but it was a very constructive. I was a good writer. I'm still a writer today. I'm still something of an editor and a leader. As I was in Boy Scouts, I'm still something of an artist. So in a lot of ways, I found an unconventional path to fulfill a lot of the skills that I found I had somewhat innately or that I acquired along the way. So in some ways, I do think very, very young Thomas Rousseau would be very, very, very much proud of me as an adult. But was there a single moment where I, had the moment of, I need to do this? Not necessarily. Even when I was attempting to join the organization that I was in before I founded Patriot Front, I didn't actually first message them to join. I sent them an email saying, hey, I could maybe design some posters for you or whatever. And then they're like, all right, you're in. If the vetting wasn't great at that time, not a whole lot was great at the time. But it was, and I kept finding myself in the proverbial room, being the person who was needed most and most, had the initiative to solve the problem. So it was a calling more than it was, a compulsion, I would say.
Has there been moments throughout Patriot Front where you're like, you just want to throw in the towel, like this is just overwhelming?
Absolutely.
It's too much?
No, I mean, I've had very stressful moments, but I've considered the discontinuation of certain tactics, for sure. I've engaged in certain tough things, like saying, man, we're definitely not going to do this again, right? But I've never considered, the whole cause. I've had very stressful moments from, being with 170, 180 men in 2020 being detained, or 2021 being detained in Philadelphia. All of us being sat down on the sidewalk and interviewed by police in the middle of the night after being, attacked for 4 miles down the street. We weren't driven out of the city. Some people like to claim that. We marched all the way through downtown for like 6 miles. It was almost ridiculous. Was that a stressful moment? I was thinking, I'm surely not going to, do that again, or I'm going to rework that. In DC, the March for Life one year, they knew we were going to be there, right? So we had crazy police presence. We had tons of liberal journalists. There were dogs. They had the police dogs, the canine units, helicopters. We were trying to get onto the subway. The police wouldn't let us on the subway. The subway cop said no. The street cop said yes. They were debating with each other. We couldn't get our box truck back in to drop the supplies into, so we'd get down to the subway. It was a very stressful moment. And to add that into it, while we were on the street, certain Antifa had decided it was a good moment to drop leaked files and try to dox people. So it was a very much when it rains it pours kind of scenario, and that's a very distinctive moment. But all of those forces, they made us stronger. They made us more resolved and resolute. I think the organization, went through a very trying period around 2020 to 2021 and 2, and it made us stronger. I think it helped define the organization you see today. So was there any moment like that where I questioned? No, absolutely not. Not for a moment, not for a second, not for a day. Whenever I face a challenge that seems insurmountable, you take a step back, you reconfigure, you reorient, and you go back to the drawing board, but you don't go home.
What do you want to say to the people who kind of fed jacket you? Like, these guys are feds, they cover their faces. What they're doing doesn't help anything. They put stickers out, they put banners. What do you kind of want to say to those people?
Well, it depends. There's 100 different arguments they use, and none of them actually make a whole lot of sense. So the argument that it's a plot to get everybody arrested would have happened by now. We've engaged in 3, the first Trump admin, the second Trump admin, and Biden. We had different FBI directors, if this was all a Fed plot, what's happening, right? People, this is just like the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot, which lasted for a few months and had about 5 to 10 people involved, something like that. Oh, this is just like the J6. They infiltrated J6. Okay, that was one day, And again, they have informants to do, entrapment crime charges like Waco or Ruby Ridge or something of that nature. Well, it hasn't happened, right? Some people say that, PF aren't feds, but it's possible they have some feds in it. And personally, based on my intimate understanding, I do not think that is the case, because there would be telltale signs. But I do like to think as if that is the case, because internally, the organization exists at such a status where if somebody did come in from such a disposition who had nefarious goals and wanted to harm the members, there would be several very noticeable and perhaps insurmountable roadblocks for them doing so. Our policy on the absence of firearms at any actions, functions, no training. I don't even want to know. Members don't sell to each other. They don't do any of these things in relation to firearms. Violence, of course. Our policies on nonviolence are very explicit. They're very stringent. No weapons of any kind at our actions. All of our actions are above board. Some people might claim, stickering a lamppost is technically vandalism, or standing on a bridge with a banner is technically loitering. Sure. Is there going to be a federal, nationwide injunction on loitering on a sidewalk? I don't think a federal judge wants to take that up. So that doesn't make any sense. Marching down the street, people say it's too dangerous and this is going to get you all in trouble. It's really not dangerous. There's been one case in PF's history where people have been charged with a crime for involvement in a PF action as a group. And that was in Idaho, which was the confluence of about 7 different very unique and non-repeated circumstances. And also, it was only 30 of us. It wasn't an actual march where you would have hundreds of men. And people don't get doxxed just for marching with us. It's a very safe tactic. Other things are to make conservatives look bad. How? Right? And the thing is, if I wanted to be a conservative, if I wanted to, play dress up as a conservative, I would just support Trump. I would say nice things about Trump, but I don't really do that. So it really begs the question of, if I'm playing as a conservative, why don't I do the number one most common conservative thing? So I would say, so in summary, what would I say to the Fed jacketers is talk to us about it. Really engage. Think about it. Think about what you're saying for more than a few seconds. Get back past the knee-jerk reaction and think about why this makes sense, why this doesn't make sense, and reevaluate who's putting these ideas. Where did you hear that? Are you saying it because you just heard somebody else say it, and you're just repeating it because you think it's true? Do you actually believe it? Right? You call other people gullible, other people sheep, right? Did you come up with this opinion on your own, right? Or are you just repeating it on Twitter, right? I think that's something I would ask them for sure.
Okay. Why do you think the media has demonized you so much? Because, I've obviously only been here for like 24 hours, probably not even. But clearly you guys work out. Obviously you go to cities, march, protest, all these things. They're all nonviolent, as it seems from what I know. And why do you think the media has demonized you? What are they scared of? Are they scared of a group of men organizing?
I think they're scared of the world that we will create, which doesn't necessarily include them. And I don't mean that as some kind of violent sensibility. I mean that we're creating a world. Right now, it's a nation within a nation, but it grows. Its frontiers grow, and the world we are building doesn't have a place for limp-wristed neoliberal internationalist journalists. It doesn't have a place for people who build their careers off the exploitation of our people and the hysteria of the masses. The world we're creating is fundamentally anathema to a lot of the ways that the world runs today. A lot of the comfortable qualities that people currently have. I think we're an agitating factor. We're at odds with these things. So I think it's politically motivated, of course. They probably are not legitimately scared that we're going to go hurt them, for example. We're not a violent organization. We're not going to come get you. But I do think they're scared of the implications of the culture shifting in our direction, which might require them to change their lives or live by different principles. Or these bugmen journalists might actually have to pick up some weights and live by some convictions for once, which seems probably scarier to them than anything else we could offer.
That's a solid answer.
Yeah.
You're talking about this world that they're scared you guys will create.
Yeah.
What does this world look like? How do we get out of this mess that clearly is in the U.S., it's in Europe, it's in Australia, it's in Canada?
Yes.
Obviously, we're in the U.S. You're an American.
Yes.
I'm an American, so we focus on here. What does a future America look like?
Well, I hope it looks a lot like Patriot Front, right? Of course. So I think we want to return to certain sensibilities of civic government. I do believe the country was originally a republic, which was then subverted into a democracy, which was then immediately usurped by a plutocracy, an oligarchy, right? Some might even say a Zionist-occupied government, right?
Some would say.
Some would say, and it wouldn't be far from the truth. So returning to a Republican model of government, but not immediately, because I think you do need. I don't believe at any point you would need to suspend the Constitution or anything like that. But domestic tranquility needs to come at the end of some serious reworking, right? You need a return to nationalism. You need a return to homogeneity. You need a return to government recognizing who its people are, that the United States is an extension of our people and is in turn loyal to them. And the Constitution is loyal to the original ideas of the founders and not whatever a modern, Cornell law judge, right, graduate might interpret after decades of neoliberal programming. So I think loyalty, I think virtues, I think there's, it's like culture. It's a million little things. But we want our country to be safe. We want our country to be respected. We want our country to have men that look and act like us. We want families. We want a solution to a great number of problems. But I don't believe that we're going to get to a certain point and then a switch is going to be flipped and now we have the reclaimed America and it's all hunky-dory. No, the nation's cause is timeless. There will always be new enemies, new challenges, whether it's technology, geopolitics. I believe in an America that is better prepared to meet the future. And a resurrection of a lot of our heritage, a knowledge of where we come from, which will help us also be more informed on where we're going. Because with enough knowledge of history, you can be very predictive about the future, right? And you can also understand, I think a lot of people are so disconnected from their heritage that they fail to realize that the men of our past were made of the same stuff, right? They had the same quantifiable propensity for ambition, for avarice, for optimism, for love, for courage, for all of these things, that we are made of the same stuff as people. And there's the idea that, the founders, they existed so long ago, they were writing these laws for a fundamentally different age. No, they were talking about the principles that govern men and the human mind, the qualities of our people. Human nature has not changed an inch, an iota since then, so it should be incredibly relevant to us. So it was a little bit, but again, we are rediscovering ourselves. So as we grow, as we achieve, as we accomplish, as we conquer, there will be a rediscovery of a lot of the things which will make that new country, which will seem as once revolutionary and yet having always been familiar.
Yeah, it's great to talk about, I guess, how the country can look like, obviously
Yes.
what the utopia would look like, but what are some logical next steps people
Sure.
can take on the individual level, obviously the community level, state, and then obviously the country level?
Yeah.
What are some of these things that you would like to see?
You're talking about like policy.
I mean,
On
policy.
the individual, you should join Patriot Front if you're able. If you're a woman and you might not be eligible, since we are a fraternal organization, get your brother, your husband, boyfriend, fiance to join Patriot Front. Outside of that, I think people need to be engaged. Men need to start looking into their lives. You need to start at your feet and work out from there, right? You need to start on the basic and the fundamentals. Get your house in order, so to speak. And I do think people need to. I don't have a whole lot of faith in conventional politics. I think it has a part to play, but I think it's part of the solution, but not the solution. It's more of a obstacle than an objective, so to speak. So there is an element to that. I think it has a part to play. We need to return to being more community focused. We need men to create businesses, networks where we uplift one another and we make our people, especially not only our people, but our people of the right convictions, more powerful within our own culture and our own spheres. Whenever the government is losing legitimacy, when matters of institutions, infrastructure, power centers are vacated, we need to make sure that we are achieving those, we are conquering those. Because if we do not, then foreign groups, the invasive groups, whether they're Jews, whether they're the Muslims, whether they're Indians, whether they're Chinese, Mexicans. The whole world wants a piece of the pie, right? They do it in different ways. Yep. Some of them are better at it than others right now, but we shouldn't discount any of them. So those are things that we need to engage in. But overall, we need to be organized. I think a lot of people. Again, going back to we have an ideological understanding, but we don't have a practical understanding of politics, of civics. A lot of people, and I've seen the argument made in certain scenarios where people say, oh, well, what we need a dictator, and he's going to arrive to power, and he's going to solve all the things, and I know he's going to do the right thing, because he's going to be just like me, right?
That reminds me of a certain event in history.
Well, that has happened in history, right? But you stretch out the true length of history, and it's not that common.
Yeah.
And also, the modern conception of this is oversimplified, right? You don't just get your revolution; you have to build it, right? You have to be a part of it. It's going to require things from you. You're not going to be. Ezra Pound said that a slave is one who waits to be freed or saved or something, right? And we should endeavor to live with such quality that we are incapable of being enslaved to ourselves, to our sensibilities, to vice, to addiction, to wasting our time. So I think that is an element. I think everybody needs to understand, one of the immediate assessments you need to make very early on is that this cause is going to ask things of you, and you need to be totally resolute and able to give those things. And in that, you will actually be more freed. If you are a slave to your natural purpose in life, to ourselves and our prosperities, you will be enslaved to nothing else. So I think there is an element of liberty in that. Again, there's so many things that people need to do. And I'm not just speaking about this in theory, right? I'm offering the solution. I have created the last 8 years of my life have been engaged singularly to answer the question you just asked me. And I'm not just telling people what to do in terms of go out on your own. I'm telling you, you can join the organization and work with others who have already done a lot of these things, who are currently doing them. We have systems, spaces, communities, institutions, infrastructure, which is meant to facilitate this process. Because we cannot assume, and assumptions are very dangerous things, we cannot assume that Americans will be able to, in aggregate, after so much has been taken, after our culture has been so diluted, that we can simply throw the rule book out into the world on social media and expect people to follow it on their own, however detailed it is. They need to be helped. People need to be, hand lifted up to the next level at every step of the way. So I think that's a lot of the things that we need to do.
Yeah, it seems a lot of people are like scared to take the first step, or
it's the scariest one.
Yeah, they take you, or they call you guys feds, call Patriot Front feds, because they're just scared to join the organ. They're scared to put something on the line. They don't want to put money on the line. They don't want to put their body. They don't want to put their mental state. Like if there's nothing on the line, nothing's gonna get accomplished.
Of course. Well, the enemy is going to accomplish everything because they have everything on the line. Because their world can only exist, their world is running on fumes and contradictions, right? It can only exist through the continuous mass social engineering until our people are totally dissolved. But if at any point they let up, nature's law will take over again, right? They have to constantly suppress, constantly mutilate the principles of our civilization and of our heritage in order to maintain their grasp on power. But moreover, yes, people do not have, I think, I don't want to say everybody, because of course I know hundreds of men that have taken this first step, and the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one. I know a lot of people who have inspired. I have so much faith in our people. I have so much confidence in our ability to achieve great things. I think the only scenario in which America dies is the one in which we do not truly fight for it. Because if we fight, we will win. The only way our culture, our heritage dies, especially in the New World, is if we don't fight at all. So there is an optimism there. But that being said, yes, it will ask things of you. You need to change. You're not good enough. None of us are good enough. I'm not good enough. You're not good enough. We're not good enough servants to our cause and to our people and to our ideals and our virtues. We never can be. And I think you need to believe that, and it makes everything else purpose-driven. It makes it make sense.
What do you think of like the infighting? There's some big names in the space. Obviously, I don't want to mention names or cause drama, but
sure.
It seems like people try to push each other down, and it seems like they're not really in there for the cause. They don't really care. It seems like they only care about themselves, even though they might be saying the things that we're talking about, but they don't really care. How do you, I guess, distinguish from the people who are real and then fake?
I think some people get lost in the internal politics. I think there's advancement and then there's upkeep. I think people get into the political, the arena, so to speak, of radical, dissident politics, whatever you want to call it, and then they find their niche, and they get so focused in the work they've created for themselves, the upkeep, the administration, the maintenance of their social circles, that they lose touch with the broader purpose. They're constantly nose to the grindstone, but they don't see the horizon anymore. And then you create all these new little challenges for yourself, and it feels like you're working. It feels like you're moving forward, but actually you're just maintaining, and it's upkeep for all of these jobs that you've made for yourself. But you're not moving the ball down the court, to use a sports analogy, very rare for me, right? But you're not doing that anymore. So I think that's a huge element, and people get caught up in all this drama. And political drama, it feels like you're winning when you get one over on the other chat room, right? It feels like you're doing something when you get somebody to log off or block you, but you're not actually. And it can't be a zero-sum game, because especially in just online communication circles, you can't make him stop posting his articles. Or make him stop, recording his podcast, or whoever these people are, right? I'm not sure exactly who you mentioned, but maybe we think different people. Maybe we think
speculations,
right? But I mean, a lot of the same principles. I think people get lost in the minutia, and they lose touch with their purpose, and they get so focused on the internals that they forget that, hey, however different you might be from this other person, your enemies are so much much more different than you.
Yeah.
And I think people get lost in the work they make for themselves. And sure, there are probably people out there that have bad motives, or they genuinely have flawed convictions. Outright, all-encompassing malice, I feel like, is much rarer than people make it out to be in their accusations, of course. But I think at that point, mudslinging, if you get really I avoid it as much as I can. I just want to represent myself and let everybody make the conclusion, because I think when you get down and you do the mudslinging, the third party, the onlooker, the person who would want to say, who should I join, who should I work with, who should I support, they see two idiots covered in mud. So you ideally want to be a representative of yourself and have trust and faith in the onlookers and the audience to be able to make those valuative judgments based on your own demonstration of your character. When we do demonstrations, we do the marches, it's a demonstration. We're showing our character, our conviction, our organization, saying, look what we can do, right? How many friends can you get to a street corner, right? Probably not 200, right? I'm not talking about you, but like the ambiguous you, right? Look how coordinated we are. Look at what we can accomplish. It's not just a, hey, look at this march, this is going to save America. No, it only needs to be worth doing. It doesn't need to save the country in and of itself. But I think, a lot of the infighting can be solved if people work harder on your own thing and focus less on others. Because people know that Patriot Front is different than other organizations. I don't need to talk about how different I am than these people, right? Because they can look at us and they can say, oh, well, PF uses these symbols, we do things in this way, we say these kinds of things, we have these convictions. So I can look at that and know that that is different from other people, and I can assume that is due to a difference in opinion or conviction or disposition. I don't need to engage in the back and forth, which doesn't really accomplish anything. I think there should be competition, but not opposition in a lot of spaces. Now, again, there is always the possibility for a legitimately nefarious figure. Again, it's rarer than a lot of people make it out to be, but that is possible. In that case, you should have the propensity to shun and ostracize people, which sometimes you have to do in organizing. But the best thing you can do is prove yourself to be better.
Yeah, it seems like mental masturbation, or like if someone's or jealousy, like if someone's doing better than someone, they might try to pull them down, bring them down. Or again, at the end of the day, people are just scared to go out in the real world and do something. That's why you and Patriot Front, or Arval at Return to the Land, or the Australian guys, there's some groups in Europe, even Canada. They're actually out there in the real world, because you can only talk about the same things, you could mention the same points for 10 years before okay, everybody knows it. What's next?
No, and I think when you're within the scope of a group chat or a forum or some kind of digital community, the battles seem a lot more approachable than in the real world where there's consequences. And it's easier and more accessible, but it's not going to get you everywhere. And again, it's a simulation. It's a simulacrum of work, of accomplishment, of conquest. But it can't be substituted for the real thing.
Yeah, 100%. So I know you touched on this a little bit, but optics, and how important is it that we have a scope of everyone, the people who are well spoken, kind of like yourself, try not to swear, try to be presentable for the camera, and then the people on the other side where they might use certain symbols, might look a certain way, might talk a certain way. Are both of those things important, or should we sway more towards one side?
Well, obviously I believe that people should be more like Patriot Front, and people should agree with us. I'm biased. I'm not going to hide my bias, of course. Everybody should join Patriot Front. But I do think there's a place for people. Now optics, I don't believe in optics as a real thing. I believe that you see things, and but I think optics as a term, which means we need to couch our language or manipulate ourselves to be more acceptable or appeasing. I think there's kind of a fundamental dishonesty there, because I don't say anything I don't believe. I don't have any reason to. I'm self-employed by the organization, right? I have no buyers, right? So we're totally honest about what we believe, and I think the notion of optics is something where you have to manipulate your appearance. It's flawed, but people do things differently, right? People have different ways of going about things, and I do think that is valuable, right? People with different symbols and things like that. I think all of the free speech area needs to be occupied. Right, up to the legal limit, because anything where you do not occupy that space, it'll get taken from you. So the organization isn't going to go out there and use obscene language or profane dialogue to represent our messaging. But I don't believe that it is wrong legally or constitutionally, or even from a practical standpoint, for some people to do that. Obviously, there's a reasonable limit to everything, and of course that can run up to the barrier of illegality. But I think there's a value to it in broader society. It serves kind of a hygiene of making sure that it's harder for the government to act on certain things legally if that space is occupied. Now, on the contrary, it can make it easier if you step over that boundary, and it lets them draw the line 1 inch closer to you. So it is a nuance, but the organization says what we believe. We do what we believe is right. There's no more layers of complexity to it than that. But I am a supporter of free speech. You should be able to use whatever symbols you like. You should be able to say whatever words you like. I think the Constitution has a lot to offer in that respect. The Bill of Rights, in particular, has a lot to offer in that respect. But of course, there's still the right opinions at the end of the day.
100%. What are your thoughts on kind of the meme culture where people seem like they're not serious? They're making edits, they're making memes.
Yeah.
Online. Do you think that's a legitimate way to go about it, or do we need, again, people who are more serious?
It's a legitimate tactic, but it's not a strategy in and of itself, right? And I do think humor is a good tool. Mm-hmm. Now, personally, Patriot Front is not incredibly humorous, right? We do not crack jokes at a lot of our demonstrations. You will not find, stand-up in my speeches, but it is valuable, and I just think it needs to be compartmentalized in a way. Because when you're creating one of the biggest things that Patriot Front has done over the years is we've created a robust, consistent, virtuous internal culture. And in doing that, I feel like you need a level of frankness and honesty and transparency of belief with your brothers. And with that being the case, layers of irony and kind of, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, maybe I believe this, we're playing, a game of chicken about who can say the most outlandish thing before somebody backs off, right? I think that is a little dangerous in terms of your founding culture of your movement. Again, these things can all be useful, especially in the social media landscape, right? Especially in terms of reaching people. Humor is a very effective tool. People who find things funny are going to share them a lot more than people who find things interesting or intellectually dense, right? So there is just and humor has always been a part of politics. It's always been a part of the human experience. So to attempt to totally divorce it from such would be foolish and wasteful. So there is an element to it. I think it just needs to be realized it is a specific tool. And like a tool, it has, it can be used to great effect in certain things, but in others, maybe not so much.
Okay, yeah, that was a solid answer. Obviously, we're both a part of Generation Z.
Yes.
And you've kind of you talked about the importance of books. You said you have a bookshelf with all American authors.
Yes.
How important is knowledge, kind of reading the people who came before us, their thoughts, their experiences, what they've gone through? Because that's definitely lost in, I guess, nowadays world. People have the attention of a goldfish. They can't focus on something.
I think it's easy to answer the question. I mean, say you spend your life striving for your nation, for your people, for your ideals, and you document that. Would you want people to remember it? Of course you would. If we want to be remembered, if we want to live beyond ourselves, then why would we not extend the same honor to our ancestors? If we believe that the nation needs to outlive us, that this is an immortal being, that that the nation exists, our people, our heritage exists in both past, present, and future, then why would we not extend that on our own personal knowledge and understanding of our people, of our ancestors, of the fight that has taken place in this land? A lot of guys, in the political understanding, they learn a lot about European, interwar history, right? They learn about those regimes. They learn about, World War II, and even like the 1960s, the civil rights movement, and a lot happened. To be fair, that's a very valid period of history. It's very important in how it is constructed and outlined the world that we have today. But there are more lessons from history than can be learned in the last 100 years. And I think it is very much important to realize that our history as Americans does not start in 1965 in the battle, right, that we have waged as a people. It does not start in 1936. It does not, it didn't even start in 1865. It goes all the way back to, the 1620 and even before that. Because, the Pilgrims, the Virginia Bay colonists, right, they did not, or Chesapeake Bay, they did not immediately lose their Europeans, but they were so much a part of their conditions, the aftermath, the context of their being. So I think a broader understanding of history and an American understanding of history. I think it's too easy to read too many contemporary authors, too much European history, where you lose focus on a lot of things which are uniquely American. And again, we need to represent the heritage that only we can. Right? A good, just generally organizationally, generally job-wise, if you're doing something, if there's something that only you can do in a setting, then you should probably be the one doing it, right? So only we can be Americans. Only we can pick up the torch from past, take it to the present, and hand it off to the future. You know, there's plenty of European nations, there's plenty of proud nations of the European race, right? You know, but I wouldn't expect that the Boers should only be reading American books. I wouldn't expect that that the French should only be reading English books. I wouldn't expect that New Zealanders should only be reading Australian books, right? I think we need to carry on our own history because we can do it better than anybody else. And again, it's the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In the civilizational scale, right? We want to be remembered. We want our legacy to be passed on, and we don't want to have to learn from the same mistakes. And we need to remember that the men of the past, you know, the founding fathers, you know, great men such as Theodore Roosevelt, Andrew Jackson, you know, Charles Lindbergh, were not, you know, they were men of previous eras, but they weren't stupid because of that, because they had less technology, right? Again, they were made of the same stuff, made of sterner stuff, one might say, better stuff. So we have a lot to learn from their convictions and their virtues and their challenges. A lot of things echo through history. And I think there's a lot to learn. And also, there is just the basic intellectual attention span, right? You need to be better able to explain your beliefs. I'm not just saying, oh, you got to use a bunch of $10 words, you know. You need to be more articulate. You need to be a good representative of your people because we are fighting on a lot of fronts right now. And one of them is the intellectual degradation of our people, as well as the lacking wisdom. I mean, there's intelligence, there's wisdom, and there's continuity. And the more our people are familiar with how their story, you know, our nationalists, right, how their fight is a contiguous journey throughout all American generations, I think the harder we'll fight. The more we'll realize that, you know, oh, this is tough. This this demonstration is tough, or I'm getting doxxed, or I'm getting harassed on Twitter after I was in a video or something. But you know what? The Pilgrims were on the Mayflower for months, you know. But you know that you know, soldiers in the Revolutionary War, you know, were dying of frostbite at Valley Forge. You know, that men in the Mexican-American War were marching 25 miles a day. You know, that frontiersmen were fighting 5-to-1 odds against Indians, right? That men had to building your own house by hand was the norm, right? You know, I think it'll help us be emboldened. And it'll make us more able to retain the challenges, to bear the challenges and the burdens of the cause.
Yeah, it seems like people are a little too comfortable nowadays, and obviously it's for a reason. You have air conditioning, you have food anytime you want, and well, people just don't go through hard things. But on the topic of books, do you have a few authors, a few books that you want to recommend to people? Maybe start learning about the American heritage.
Yes, Theodore Roosevelt was actually a very prolific author even before he was president. So his multi-volume work, The Winning of the West, if you only read the first volume, you'll still be in good shape. He also wrote The Rough Riders, which I have read. It's a very good book. Lothrop Stoddard was an amazing author. I'm personally fond of his book, Reforging America. I also recently read a book, Theodore Bilbo, Take Your Choice. He wrote about the color line issue and the division between Anglo-Saxons and, you know, the descendants of slaves and the African race in the South, and the past, present, and future of that. He wrote that in the 1930s, I believe. Very, very interesting. It's out of print, of course, so you'll have to find a copy. But a very interesting look into the period of history. I've read a lot from the founders. Thomas Jefferson, you know, you can look at quotes. The founders didn't write full books very often. But you know, there's a lot of very fascinating quotes and excerpts. Thomas Jefferson, in his notes on the state of Virginia, talks in very detailed quality about the biological realities of race and about how the country could go about solving the slavery issue. You know, Jefferson, Washington, Monroe, all believed in solving the slavery issue via emancipation and repatriation. Very important to have those two together. So I think, you know, reading into that would help elucidate Benjamin Franklin's Notes on the Increase of Mankind, I believe. He talked about demographics in the 1750s, 60s, and a lot of the same applies today. He talked about how immigration, right? If your population is not plentiful enough, even back in the day, even in the 1700s, the mid 1700s, people say, "Oh, well, immigrants fill the gap." And he and Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton, all at different points, said, "Actually, no, that won't work, because the more you bring in, it'll decrease the fertility of your native population, and you will, in the end, not produce any. You won't actually fill anything." And I mean, people were talking about the importation of slaves in the 1700s, just like we talk about the importation of illegals for cheap labor. I mean, these same problems appear throughout history. I mean, you could even go back to the Roman Empire's, systems of cheap labor. Now, these are perennial issues, and we don't need to only review the modern day to find solutions to them. So, the founders, Theodore Roosevelt is a good author. For a more granular experience in certain elements of American history, Francis Parkman is a favorite author. He's a historian. He traveled from St. Louis to Montana, I believe, on the Oregon Trail in the 1830s. So it's a very interesting experience of what America was like in the early days. Every time people ask me this, I'm always forgetting books. As soon as you put me on the spot.
You said some solid ones.
But that's
for
a
people
few.
to
That's
start.
a few for you to start. Go to Sons of Columbia. It's the new. It's a Telegram channel which has all the paintings. Are you familiar with it? If you're not,
I'm not.
You gotta follow it.
I'll check it out.
What are you doing? But there's a lot of excerpts, and not all of those are from books, but a lot of them are random quotes that we found, and those are very elucidating. And if you ever go to those, just look up the book, look up the quote, look up the full thing with the document. We always cite them as best as we can, and read that, and you'll be in good shape.
Okay, great answers. What would you say to someone who kind of doesn't see race, or they're an American but they don't really care about the country, they don't care that it's going to shit? They like open up the borders. Why does it matter? Like what would you say some of that? Or if they don't notice it at this point of time, is it even worth trying to tell someone this?
It certainly is. It's worth trying to save everybody we can. And if they don't see anything and they don't have, well, I would first be curious as to why you're watching this. But number two, yes, it is important that race sees you, society sees you, these impacts that you are a part of society. You are both in and of the world if you have these dispositions. And you can either take an active role or you can be pushed around by it. People are out there, they want to exploit you. They want to destroy you. And what we're offering isn't just a political philosophy, it's also a way of life. And even if you subtracted the idealistic qualities of it, which you can't really do in practice, but theoretically, people in the organization living as we do will be healthier than your average person because of how America is declining. They will have more access to a broader set of skills and people who are willing to stick their necks out for them, so to speak. They will have greater access to social mobility. I mean, people shouldn't get involved in the cause for self-interested reasons, for sure, because that breaks down if everybody's only in it for their own access, right? You need to pay it forward. Yeah. But being a part of living like we do, and again, it's not just that we have all the right opinions. It's not a checklist. We're not filling out a form and hoping that we get all the answers right. It's an encompassing lifestyle. And it is healthier. It is your children will be safer. They will have we will have stronger families, stronger communities. You'll be more prosperous. There's every reason to have these convictions because again, ignoring race will not get it to go away, right? Ignoring the decline of society will not make it stop. And a lot of people, naturally do just kind of go along with things in the way that things go. But in times of great trial, in times of great chance and change, we need as large of a percentage of the population as possible of our men, our American men, the most valuable demographic there is, to take an active role. And what's good is I've built a lot of the infrastructure for it already. You've already got a vehicle. You don't have to do the first 10 steps. I've been working on that for you, right? You just need to get along, right? Get along at this point in the game. And it's a lot easier than it would have been in years past. You have something ready for you now. I wish in 2017 I had what we have now, right? So we've done a lot of the hard work. We've learned a lot of the lessons the hard way, right? So, and it's only going to get easier, but you shouldn't wait. because at a certain point we need people to get in. We need to learn those lessons. We need to face the new trials, right? We need to sweat, right? We need to bleed for it. But anyways, I think people need to stand up. They need to step up. They need to get involved.
What's next for you on the agenda? On a personal level, are you in the future? Are you looking to run for office?
Probably not personally anytime soon. I would need to be at least 35 to run for president, and I don't see myself in any city councils doing a whole lot of work better than what I'm doing now. But what's next for the organization? Well, we want to grow. The organization has a scalability to what it does, a replicability. Whenever we achieve a success in one network, we're saying, we refine the model. We say, let's export it. Let's export it 22 times, 24 times. And then, somebody new, it's an organic process. Somebody new will come and say, I have this idea. I think we should try this. We'll say, let's workshop it together with experience, and then we'll implement that, refine it, export it, replicate it. Let's change 100 minds. Let's change 1,000 minds. Let's get 100 men back into shape. Let's get 100 men more, jobs where they can better supply for their families, have more kids. We do baby fundraisers, right? Everything we do scales. To the 1, to the 10, 100, 1,000. And then through that scalability, we are growing. It's like a nation. It's an organic thing. We're not a company. We're a society. And we're achieving new resources, and we're finding new ways to implement those. It's manifest destiny on a new scale. So what exactly is next, tactically speaking? Of course, that's proprietary. But what is next is a lot of replication of success. What is next is a lot of new minds, lives, and bodies within the sphere of what we do. What is next is a lot of positive change in people's lives. And I hope what is next is some people who are watching this who are going to say that now's the time. I've heard enough. I'm ready.
What are some of the requirements for someone to join? Like, what do you look for in a person, and what immediately disqualifies them? And how can someone join if they're interested?
Of course. So you need to be at least 18 years of age. You need to be an American, and we talked about what American nationality is. So you need to be a descendant of the European race. The organization does not tolerate religions outside of you either being Christian, being heathen or pagan of the European variety, or of, you can be non-religious. You can't be anti-religious. So you need to be one of those. We do not tolerate Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Confucians, you name it. No practitioners of African shamanism. You need to be obviously no homosexuals of any kind are allowed, because that would run contrary to the strong family's vision. You need to be a team player. You need to be able to work with others. You need to not have antisocial tendencies. And if you have a little bit and you're willing to work on them, then we'll work with you. A base level of fitness is encouraged, but people can join the organization being out of shape, or they can try to join the organization being out of shape, and we will work with you. A lot of people, I think, they overinflate. I mean, I do appreciate the perception that the organization has in a lot of people's minds of us being, this elite, very disciplined force. But it's a lot more approachable than you think. Not everybody joins the organization and sees, like the blue-coated super soldier, right? It's very approachable. We work with people. We want people to get better. We need to believe, for any of this to work, we need to believe that people can change for the better. So we're willing to work with people. We accept people who have things that they need to work on, whether it's somebody who's trying to get off of, not everything to work on, but if somebody has a substance abuse they're trying to kick, if somebody has fitness they're trying to get back into, if somebody is indigent and they're trying to work on being self-sustaining, we can work with that, and we have systems, we have experience, we have community that builds all of those things. And another thing is people say, well, I'm not sure if Patriot Front is active in my area. It is. I don't care where you are. 48 contiguous states in Alaska, we're active near you. Literally wherever you are, we can get to you. Right, so everywhere. I don't care where you are. So that's another thing. You have to be within the country. The main thing that you need is the courage to step forward. The main thing you need is the initiative to take the first step, and the passion to follow through. Because again, you don't need to be this master strategist that has it all figured out. We have people for that, right? You don't need to be the guy who can bear all the whole weight and you charge forward. Have it with it all on your shoulders. You can share that burden. You don't need to be the person with all the answers. You just need to be the person who's willing to step forward and participate, right? It's a cause. It's an accomplishment that'll take 1 million men, right? And all you need to do is have the conviction and the readiness to be one of them.
Well said. Where can anyone find you? I know you're pretty hard to find on social media.
We are extremely censored. We are censored on Twitter, X. I'll start calling it X when they stop banning us. We're censored on Twitter, Rumble, even supposedly a free speech platform. Yeah, obviously Instagram, TikTok.
Yeah.
Everything, but we're on Telegram. But if you want to find all of our social media accounts, you can go to patriotfront.us, which you can't even type into Twitter. You know that you can't even type it in. You can't even post the link, right? You see people have to write .dot. Anyways, patriotfront.us. Go to the socials page to find all of our pages. You can watch a lot of videos. You can read a lot. Read the manifesto on our website. You can find a lot more of what we're about. We're very interested in and motivated to press our ideas out into the world. So we are constantly sharing our ideas. Go to our website. It's the nexus of everything else. You can submit an application there after you've read through things if you're interested. Follow our Telegram where we post things almost every day regarding our action. Stay posted, and if you and support what we do. And if you are not, maybe you believe you're ineligible, maybe you're too old, you're really old, or you're really young, you're too young, or for whatever reason you don't think you're a fit, and you might be, and you should have more faith in yourself. But you can share our content online because we are so censored. We rely on our members and our supporters to share our videos, our podcast clips, our activism, our graphics onto again Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, everywhere to keep the pressure on. So if you're a supporter and you're not ready to join yet, even though maybe you should, you can help in that with the content side of things. And just get involved. Do something. Learn, be better, take an active role. It's not enough to have the right opinions. You need to have the right life.
100%. Of
course.
All right, Thomas Rousseau, thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
This was a fun conversation. Yeah, the link will be below if I can post it. If I can't, he obviously just said it.
Yes.
And yeah, this was a good conversation, and everyone take care.